Why do we care what they want? Well, let me put some perspective on this for you. This is a generation that baby boomers were 80 million in size at their peak. 80 million people in the baby boomer generation at that maximum. Right now, they're at about 77, 78 million and shrinking. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but mortality rates are starting to hit in for them. Following the baby boomers were Gen X. And Gen X, at their peak, are 40 million in size. Half the size of baby boomers. It's why we're still talking about baby boomers and why we've been talking about baby boomers for so many years. They've driven our economy, they've controlled our wealth, they've controlled everything that we do in industry and business, just across the platform, everything. Now, here come millennials and everybody's talking about them, but we go, why? Well, they're 83 million in size, and they're still growing because of immigration and some other factors. 83 million in size. That means they are now the largest generation in U.S. history, possibly world history. And on top of that, they're primarily the kids of the baby boomers. And so when we talk about wealth transfer, who's in line to get the majority of the wealth that passes from the baby boomers into the next generation? Millennials. In fact, the majority is going to skip right over the Gen Xers and land squarely in the lap of the millennials. Now, some of you are breaking into a cold sweat because you're like, they still live in my basement. I know, right? They're still living at home, and you're like, they can't run their own lives. And they're going to control our economy? Yes. So, and here's where it starts to get even creepier. They already make up 34% of the U.S. workforce, which makes them the largest living generation in the U.S. workforce today. In 2 years, that number is expected to grow to 50% of the U.S. workforce. In about 5 to 10 years, 60 to 65% of the U.S. workforce. That's why we care about this generation right now. And here's where it gets even, and people always go, yes, yeah, okay, that's great. 5 years down the road, 2 years down the road, but are they buying houses right now? In 2010, they purchased 41% of all homes sold in the U.S. And everybody goes, yeah, but we had the first-time home buyer tax credit. That was an anomaly. In 2011, according to the NAR, they purchased 31% of all homes sold in the U.S. They had the tightest lending restrictions. They had the tightest credit restrictions. They had no incentive whatsoever to go out and buy a home, and yet they still bought a third of all the homes sold in the U.S., and that number is only going to continue to grow. The reason it was down so far this last year is because so many pushed forward their plans in 2010. That number is only going to continue to grow. This is a generation that is very, very important to the future of this industry and of your business. So when we talk about them, how do we relate to them? How do we understand them? How do we understand the impact that they're going to have on this industry? The first thing we have to do is understand that there are 5 traits that we're going to talk about this generation. The first 4 deal with emotional triggers. Emotional triggers for them, because when you buy a house, we all know this. Buying a house is not a logical decision. I'm sorry, if anybody thinks it is, it's not. Every study that has been done on any purchase decision, even down to the earbuds that you buy for your phone, it is an emotional decision that you make that you back up with logic. And so what we have to understand is that if this is an emotional decision, what are the triggers, what are the traits of this generation that are triggering their emotional connection to a particular house or a particular property? And there's 4 that we're going to talk about. The 5th trait is a communicative trait. It's how we communicate with each other. It's how we communicate with you. It's how we communicate with the world around us.